What is up, nerd friends? Welcome back to the Nerd Bench new speed control day. XR10 Legacy revamp, the V2, the update, if you will. The XR10 Pro Legacy has been a fan favorite and it's back with an update. New hardware, new firmware, new tuning, that and much, much more. Let's pop it open and take a look. This is a freshly received XR10 Pro Legacy, what we're gonna probably call the Legacy V2 or the 2026 edition. It's pretty much a complete revamp from the previous XR10 Legacy, if you will. Looks very, very similar. It still has the old classic style fan, but it does have lots of new features. There it is. But there's the speed control. Best friend in the whole wide world, the instruction manual. You get the custom folded stickers, some shrink tubing, a little mounting tape, the double-ended harness for doing the speed control programming, and a couple handy-dandy zip ties. There it is, XR10 Pro Legacy. It says it right on the side now. It's a 13-gauge wire installed. There is the classic external power cap, sensor port on the back. Receiver wire is kind of the standard length, if you will. And you do have the fan on top pre-installed with the cool little mini plug and that all-important programming port on the top. That is where you do your speed control tuning. Just like all of the Xerun series speed controls, it does require a programmer to do the tuning. This guy works with either the LCD Program Box Pro, or it will work with the OT as well. It does support the Bluetooth features inside of here, or with the standalone as well. So for any of the real-time data, that's what you can use if you want to do the benchtop tuning. So very similar size, if not the same size as the previous Legacy. We'll throw the handy calipers on there to see the skinny width, if you will, is 30.9. The long width is 37.4, that's the millimeters. And then you go to the highest part of the fan and you're looking at 32, call it 33 millimeters. And just to the top without the fan, in case you're wondering, it's only barely 20 millimeters, 19.7. And then one more time, just to cover the width of the board so you get an idea of that one, 36.8, call it 37 millimeters that direction. It does have the standard fan on top, what I call a 30 millimeter fan if you measure corner to corner. Uses the same one that the XR10 Pro G2 and G2S did. And it does have added smart fan technology now. So there's a temperature sensor inside the speed control that only runs the fan when it needs it. So the fan will burp on when you turn the speed control on sometimes, but it won't run unless the speed control gets hot, if you will, and then you can disable that in the settings also. Legacy also has reverse voltage protection. So if you plug it in backwards, with the standard cap, the normal cap will pop, but you can replace that and the speed control will still work fine. But if you were to plug it in backwards and pop the cap, don't run it without replacing the cap, but usually the speed control will live through that fine for the most part. Something that the previous Legacy did not have. It got added back into the Legacy now to kind of modernize it. In the settings segment, the big thing that got added was softening. I think for a lot of applications, modified racing, especially, the softening values can be very helpful. The original Legacy did not have softening, so we brought softening back into the V2 Legacy. As far as like the hard, boring specs, if you will, it's a 150 amp rating. It is a 10 scale rated speed control for all things 10 scale, 4.5 turn and above for most applications. It's a 2S rated speed control, only a 2S LiPo. You can disable LiPo protection and run it with nickel metal hydrides if you wanted to, but for most of us these days, 2S LiPo. The BEC in the speed control goes up to 7.4 volts, and it is rated at a 5 amp regulator. And the fan runs off that BEC voltage as well. And as we mentioned, a dedicated programming port on the front, and it does have that reverse voltage protection built in. So the data logging has also been updated. Previously, it didn't support the real-time data. So what that is you can get the actual output readings from the speed control live onto your phone via the app, and you can see what's going on with the speed control. It's not really intended for like driving around the track, but it's great for benchtop troubleshooting. And we have been in situations where we do turn it on and drive the car around the track and it stays connected the whole time. It kind of depends on how good the Bluetooth range is on your phone and the building and all that stuff. But for the most part, it's intended as like a benchtop troubleshooting situation so you can get information out of the speed control on the fly. We're going to take a quick look at all of the settings that this speed control has, kind of run through them real briefly, talk about some of the new stuff, but most of it is kind of standard operating system for a race level speed control, if you will. So I do have a battery connected over here. I have my programmer connected into the programming port on the front side of the speed control. You can use the standalone of an LCD program box, or you can use the built-in Bluetooth, or you could use an OTA module if you needed to. We're going to use the built-in Bluetooth feature of this guy. So power on the speed control, this guy comes on. In your app, you're going to go to that upper right-hand corner. You're going to select your HOBBYWING device from here. If you haven't changed the name of the Bluetooth, it'll say HW something, basically. You connect to that, and your default password is always the same. It's all 8s. And then once that connects, to get into the speed control settings, you go to parameters, and that'll bring you into the speed controls parameters. Try to center this guy up here. Make sure that guy's focused. All right. So once you get in, you have some basic stuff here in the top. You can change the name of your profile, or you can select from the preset profiles. These are just names on profiles and some preset parameters to get you kind of in the ballpark. I mean, realistically, they're just starting points, and you can rename all of these and change them to whatever you need to. So don't think that because you're running that exact profile, you're good to go. You still need to, like, you know, test, do some basic running, make sure everything's all right, but they'll just kind of give you a place to get started. We had to put some sort of name on them instead of just having them be profile 1 through 10 and them all being the same. This way you can look at the profile, see a bunch of changes, and kind of hop around through that if you need to. So let's start at the top. These are your linking in and out of the speed control, and then you have your rename to rename the active profile, your reset. If you make a bunch of changes and you don't like it or you want to go back to factory, that's what reset is for. Import and export is used for moving these settings in and out of the speed control. You can save them to your phone and then bring them back later, or you can use them to get into other speed controls, only if they're the same exact model and they're on the same exact firmware as well. And then most importantly, once you make profile changes in here, you have to hit save. You can change them till you're blue in the face. It doesn't matter. If you don't hit save, nothing's going to go into the speed control. So we'll run through the settings here. Running mode is where you turn the reverse on. A lot of folks don't realize that in racing for years, reverse wasn't allowed. So a lot of the racing speed controls default with that off. You can jump in here, turn that on if you need to. Max reverse force. Many of us aren't good at using the reverse, so we start with that lower so that when you do turn on the reverse, you're not like doing donuts or doing crazy stuff. Voltage cutoff, thermal protection for the speed control, and thermal protection for the motor are the next ones. These are adjustable for individuals' race needs, if you will. A lot of racers run this stuff all disabled because they'd rather ruin a battery, overheat something, than lose a race, so to speak. So use this kind of safely. I leave the ESC and motor thermal protection all the time, but I always adjust my voltage cutoff off of auto. Auto is very safe, so if you want to make sure that you never hurt your batteries, leave it on auto. It'll cut off nice and early, maybe way too early. So that's something to keep in mind if you're getting a new setup, to check your LiPo setting, because auto is very, very safe. And most of the racing speed controls in the Xerun series, this voltage that you're selecting, you'll see there it says 3, it goes up to 4. Oh, no, I should hold that up here. You see, this is the actual pack voltage. So to be safe, I usually go to like 6.6, and that'll make sure that it's, you know, above 3 volts per cell, basically, is what you're trying to do for most LiPos. But I always try to say a disclaimer: check your battery manufacturing suggestions and recommendations, and always do what they say. Sometimes your voltage cutoff that you set to is not going to match what it is when you put the battery on there. That's a normal thing, and very much why this is adjustable. Sometimes you'll have to set it below 6 volts because your battery's so good. Sometimes you'll have to set it way above so that you don't over discharge. It has to do with the health of the battery, the quality of the connections, what the battery's actually capable of, and very much why it's so adjustable, so that you can fine-tune how much runtime you use out of your battery. And you can tell by, if you have a decent charger, it'll tell you what milliamps it puts back in, so you can judge that off of what it's rated and if you should turn that up or down. BEC voltage, when using the app, it's adjustable in 0.1 segments to adjust the BEC voltage, not the amps. So if your servo is rated for higher volts, a lot of times you'll run it at a higher voltage, and it'll make the servo run a little bit cooler, because higher voltage is a little bit more efficient, but it also makes the servo much faster and stronger. So that's something to keep in mind when you start messing with that stuff. One of the new features is Smart Fan, so that's got that temperature sensing fan control, only runs the fan when the speed control needs it. Remote off is after that. That is so when you pull into the pits and you hold the brakes for like a 5 or 8 count, it'll turn the speed control off. Real handy for some of the cars that are hard to get to the on-off switches, or you can't get into the body after the race, whatever. You can turn it off from the radio. Kind of cool. Motor rotation controls the forward direction of the motor. So when you give it throttle, it'll make the motor either turn counterclockwise, which is normal, or clockwise, which is like a reverse transmission vehicle. All right, so once you get through the general settings, you get to your throttle control settings, and you have throttle rate control, neutral range, initial throttle force, coast, PWM drive frequency, 2 new settings, the softening value and the softening range. We'll start at the top. Throttle rate control is how the speed control responds to your inputs. The higher this is, the more linear the throttle is. So it's maxed out. The speed control is going to try to do exactly what your throttle input does. And as you lower that setting, it puts kind of a time delay on it. So if the throttle feels too twitchy, you feel like you're always breaking the tires loose, you don't have enough traction, or it's just hard to drive, you start to lower your throttle rate control, and that'll tame the throttle down for you. Neutral range is your dead zone between throttle and brake, and it'll help with drag brake consistency. If you've got an old radio, you race in dusting conditions, your throttle hasn't been calibrated on your radio in a long time, you've never heard that term before, you make your drag brakes, or maybe your reverse, if you're using a reverse, very inconsistent, you can increase the neutral range to help kind of widen that zone up so it hits an easier neutral. Initial throttle force is the starting power on the motor. So if you've ever sat and tried to very slowly start your motor, sometimes you'll notice that at the very tip of the throttle, the motor won't really move. And initial throttle force allows you to fine tune that. So as soon as you touch the throttle, the motor moves. Or if you want it to start very hard, you can increase your initial throttle force. It's kind of like a punch setting. Coast setting is like a motor run-on. So if the car always has too much deceleration when you let off the throttle, let's say you turn the drag brakes down, you've made sure you've calibrated, but the natural cogging, the natural magnet of the motor is still too much deceleration, the coast allows you to let the motor have a little bit of run-on. It takes all that away. The higher that is, the more run-on or more coast you're going to have, the faster it's going to freewheel. PWM drive frequency is the overall aggressiveness of the throttle. As you run this higher, the throttle is going to feel smoother or softer, and as you run the frequency lower, it's going to be punchier or more aggressive. For modified racing, you're probably going to be 6K and above most of the time. For spec class racing, you're probably going to be at the bottom of the frequencies most of the time. And then something that's got added to the Legacy is you have the customized throttle curve now. Let's get into that. And you can adjust the frequency based off throttle position. Very handy if you're getting into real tricky track conditions where you need the throttle to be soft at the front but be more aggressive. You can set higher frequencies at the start of the throttle and then make them be lower frequencies at the end, or vice versa. So pretty cool stuff. And then the 2 new settings, the softening, the value and the range. Softening is basically reverse timing. So for blinky mode racing, this is not legal. But what it does is it takes away power from the motor, that's the value, through the first part of the throttle, that's the range. So you can take away more or less power with your softening value, and you can make it be more farther into the throttle, all the way up to like 75% of the throttle range, depending on what you need it to do. And what it's doing is as you apply throttle, it's taking away power for that amount, and then as you get away, the car gets up to speed, motor ramps up, you got more traction, things are up and rolling, it turns that feature off. There's a transition from taking away the power to giving it back. It lets you have some fine tuning over the throttle response. So it's always very, very hard to lay down the power, or you can't feel like you can apply the throttle slow enough. Softening is going to help that. All right, we get to your brake control settings. Drag brake is the amount of brakes it applies at neutral. It's not for drag racing, obviously, but it's coast brake, basically. When you let off the throttle, it'll decel the motor. You can adjust that up or down. Max brake force is the push brake amount that you have. Sometimes you have way too much brakes. This allows you to turn it down in the speed control. It can help reduce temperatures in the speed controls and the motors. It can help reduce damage and stuff like that too. If you don't need tons of brakes, it allows you to turn it down right from the speed control itself. Brake rate control is much like the throttle rate control. If the brakes feel way too snappy, way too aggressive, you can't apply the brakes slow enough, you start to lower that brake rate control setting. Brake frequency, just like the drive frequency, again, lower frequencies are going to be more aggressive or grabbier. Higher frequencies are going to be smoother, or I guess you'd say softer, if you will, and you do get the customized option in there also. And then you have 3 different types of brake controls: linear, traditional, and hybrid. These are going to affect the overall, I guess you'd say, characteristics of the brakes. Traditional is where most of us are going to be because it's the easiest to manage. If you need a little more aggressive overall brakes, linear is going to be a little more aggressive, and then the hybrid kind of balances the two of them out, if you will. I haven't run the speed control myself enough to really tell you which one I like, but historically with the speed controls, I always run traditional brakes, and that hasn't changed. That's why it's called traditional, because HOBBYWING. And now, we get into the timing, boost and turbo timing. Boost timing allows you to set, well, you got to turn it on here. If it's set to 0, none of this stuff works. But you see you have two different types of activations. You can set your RPM, or it has auto, where the speed control says, I know what to do with the timing, let me take over. That's the safest way to go about it. But if you find that you want to really fine tune where your boost comes in, that's what these RPMs are for. You can adjust the start and the finish range, and that's basically your start and finish window of where it applies the amount of boost that you gave it, and it keeps it in there once you stay above that RPM. So it applies it stays there, and until you lower that RPM, it stays kind of with that amount of timing applied in there. The boost timing and the turbo timing, they all add together for total timing with your end bell timing, so something to keep in mind. So I'll set this back to 0. And then turbo timing is also timing advanced that applies from the speed control, but it only happens once you get to full throttle, and that's where you get these other settings. We'll turn some of this on so we can take a look. Turbo delay, you can see you have 1/10 of a second increments, 0.5, 1, 1.5, so it's 0.5 increments all the way up to a full second, and that is the delay after you get to full throttle before it starts to apply the timing. The turbo increase rate is the degrees per second that it applies the timing at, and you can go as low as 1 degree every 1/10 of a second to as fast as all of the timing right away, or 30 degrees in every 1/10 of a second. And that allows you to control how quickly it applies the timing as you go through the RPM range at the top. So it's basically a time control over how quickly it wants to dump timing onto the motor. Lower is obviously going to be safer, higher is going to be more aggressive. And then turbo decrease rate is how it takes the timing away. And the reason that this is a thing is that as you let off the throttle when the timing is in there, it affects the drag brake. So you want this to take the timing away fairly slowly in most applications. Or if you want that deceleration right away, you want to add some high-speed drag brake, you can have it take away the timing a little bit more fast, or more quickly. And then at the bottom of the parameter screen, you got your basic data logs. There's basic data logs is what I call them, are mins and maxes. So you get your maximum speed control temperature, your maximum motor temperature. And motor temperature is only going to show up when you're using HOBBYWING motors, because HOBBYWING motors are the only ones that have HOBBYWING temperature sensors for motors in them. I don't know, it makes sense. Most speed controls, or most motors rather, don't have a temp sensor on the 6th wire on the center. There's just nothing there. It shows you your minimum battery voltage and your max motor RPM. Those can be helpful for looking at how hard you were on the battery over the run, and as well as you got higher top speeds. But this one can be a little misleading, because if you air out the car or have a big crash, it'll spool the motor up and you get some errant, super high RPM. So something to keep in mind. It wouldn't be a parameter video if I didn't remind you, don't forget to hit save. You make all those changes, you got to hit save so that it actually puts it into the speaker. So there you have it, a quick look at the XR10 Pro Legacy. Who's this speed control for? The casual, serious RC enthusiast. Maybe you're not looking to go full bank on your investment for your race program, but you still want a top level speed control that's rated for modified motors, it's rated for spec motors, it has the safeties built into it, it has 99% of all the cool new tuning features that you're going to want to mess with, but a classic design that is proven, if you will. The XR10 Legacy is right up your alley. So at the time of recording, I want to say this is $150. Check the description down below. We'll have the links for everything that you need. But great price for a very feature-packed, race-ready speed control for the, I guess you'd say, budget-minded serious racer. So there you have it, folks. A look at the new XR10 Pro Legacy. A new take on a classic design. We, of course, thank you for tuning in. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, please shoot us an email, northamerica@hobbywing.com. We also do a podcast. It's called RC Stuff, powered by HOBBYWING. You can find it on your favorite podcast service or check the link in the description down below. We give away free RC stuff each and every episode. All you have to do to find out how to enter to win is listen to an episode. RC Stuff, powered by HOBBYWING. And as always, folks, thanks for watching another episode of The Charlie Show right here on the HOBBYWING official YouTube channel. We will see you all next time.